These are the words of a true story. Through dark of night a ship sailed on the water. 900 men at war, so far from home. The icy sea from Newfoundland to Greenland, a battlefield upon the ocean foam. The deadly force of enemy torpedoes then broke the eerie silence of the night, and chaos reigned as blood revealed the horror. Some men would live, but some would surely die. For chaplains, men of fervent faith, men of honor, true and brave, gave life-preserving jackets to their men. And when there were no more to give, they willed that 4 more men might live, as willingly they gave their own. Quietly they walked among the wounded, without regard for color, race, or creed, speaking words of hope to those despairing, hurrying to meet each human need. Their legacy will live throughout the ages, for chaplains who were faithful and true, who gave their all while knowing death awaited. True holy men who did what God would do. For chaplains, men of fervent faith, men of honor, true and brave, gave life-preserving jackets to their men. And when there were no more to give, they willed that 4 more men might live, as willingly they gave their own. In majesty they rode that sea of glory, giving all that any man can give, not knowing that the world would hear their story of how they died that other men might live. For chaplains with uncommon faith, born to serve and born to save, stood arm in arm upon that sinking ship, dying with a prayer upon their lips.
I was on that ship, the Dorchester. I'll never forget that night. It was so cold when you were outside the ship you could barely breathe. It was so hot and stuffy inside the ship you could barely breathe. It was miserable. I kept asking myself, how did I get here? Well, let me tell you how I got there. I'm a kid from Colorado, out in the plains. A little place called Sterling. Probably never heard of it. Mostly cows, sagebrush, jackrabbits. Yeah, I grew up on the farm out there, and we worked hard on the farm. But Mom called me in one day and she said, when you go to school this next year, you will take typing. Typing? I don't want to take typing. That's for girls. I went to Dad. Dad said, do what Mom says. So I took typing. I hated it. Typing. Who needs typing? Then it got worse. Mom said, you're going to take piano lessons. I said, Mom, I don't want to take piano. She said, you will take piano lessons. So I took typing and I took piano lessons. It was miserable. Yeah, we were dirt poor. We had poor dirt, so what can you expect? And I looked around and I said, I don't want to spend my life out here looking at sagebrush and looking at cows and playing the piano, typing. So in the summer of 1942, I got an idea. There was a war going on. A lot of my friends, they were enlisting, but I wasn't even 18, so I couldn't enlist. I went down and I tried to enlist. And the fellow there, he knew me. He said, you're not 18. You can't enlist without your parents' permission. Well, I knew Mom would never give that. So I figured, what am I going to do? Then I had an idea. I took a piece of paper and I wrote 18 on it. And then on the other half, I wrote 18 and I tore them in half. So I had 18 and 18, and I put them in my boots. And I went down to another town and I said, I want to enlist. The fellow said, you look awful young. Are you over 18? I said, yes, sir, I am. I wasn't lying. 18. Well, Dad was pretty upset. Mom was crying. But I enlisted, and now I was going to see the world. I'm going to get off this ranch. I'm going to do something in life. And they sent me to a place called Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Now, some people say Missouri, but if you've ever been there in the summer, it's misery. Take it from anybody been to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri? Oh, one person, yeah, you understand. And in the winter, it's cold and it's miserable. There's somebody who's been there. So anyway, we had 12 weeks of basic training. Well, I'll tell you what, I learned some things there. Why, I met a fellow called a drill sergeant. You know what the drill sergeant is? He's your worst nightmare. That's what he is. He can make you do push-ups until your arms feel like rubber. I'll tell you what, I found some muscles I didn't know I even had. And I heard some words that I had never heard before. And I met some people too. I mean, we had people from all over the country there. This is the first time I'd been off the farm very far. We had people from all over. And so I was talking with one of the guys there. I said, where are you from? He said, New York. I said, where? New York. Where's that? He said, are you kind of a country bumpkin? You don't know where New York is? And somebody poked me and he said, New York. Oh, okay, I've heard of that. And he was a streetwise guy, but we trained together. And you know, when you're in that situation, you learn to trust each other. That's a big thing, you know. Well, we went out one night for record fire, they called it, at night. Had to shoot our rifles. I was pretty good with the rifle. I mean, I grew up on a ranch. What do you expect? There wasn't a jackrabbit around when I got through. Anyway, we were out there, and when we got through, it was dark and it was cold, and we were miserable and wanting to go back to the barracks. And so we all got in the truck, and they turned the key, and it went, That's not a good noise. That's a bad sound. And so the drill sergeant, he says, I've got a solution. We'll walk back to the barracks. Well, that's like 10 miles. And we're tired, and we're hungry. And I said, drill sergeant, can I take a look at it? You know, I grew up on a farm. What happens when things break on a farm? You don't throw it away, you fix it. Well, I'd been fixing stuff since I was knee-high to a pair of pliers. And so I poked around in there, and I found some stuff and connected some wires and cleaned off some things, and I said, okay, try it again. It started right up. I was the hero. Well, the next day, the company commander called me into his office. I thought, oh boy, did I ruin the truck? They're going to charge me. I'll be paying them back the rest of my life. And he called me in and he said, relax. Yes, sir. He said, can you drive? Yes, sir. I mean, I've been driving stuff since I was, little. Yes, sir, I can drive. He said, well, I need a driver. Can you type? Yes, sir, I can type. He said, well, I need a clerk and a driver, so I'll make you my clerk and my driver. And he said, he promoted me right there. Technical corporal, right there, technical corporal. I was working for the boss now. That was a pretty good deal. And then he came to me one day and he said, got news for you. Yes, sir, what's that? He said, you're going to be shipping out to Europe. Oh, Europe. Oh, wow. I mean, I'm from a farm in Colorado. Europe is like on the other side of the world. Well, actually it is. But in many ways. And the only trouble is there's a war going on there. But he said, that's where you're going to go. And so it was January 23rd of 1942. And I got on a train and we went, and my buddy from New York, he was on there too. We were traveling together. We had 24 hours when we got to the big city. Man, I was looking around. He took me all over. Wow, those buildings are taller than our silos. They're amazing. And so he showed me all around the city, and it was amazing. It was marvelous. But I'll tell you one thing: when the wind blows down through those big, tall, it's like being in a canyon because that wind, it just comes right through you. It was cold, and so we decided we better get down to the ship. And so it was on Staten Island, Pier Number 2, and we got down there, and all these warships lined up. Oh, it was marvelous. The biggest ship I'd ever seen before was a rowboat. No comparison, let me tell you. And I looked, and we were looking, and somebody came and says, what ship are you looking for? I said, the Dorchester. And the guy said, whoa, the Dorchester. Way down at the end of the pier. Well, the way he said it didn't make me feel real comfortable, I got to tell you that. And so we went down the end of the pier, and sure enough, here was a Dorchester, a little kind of he was about 400 feet long, about 55 feet wide. It wasn't real big. It had been, before it had been a pleasure boat that would go up and down the East Coast and take people on weekends on the cruises and things like that. It would take 350 people. Now there were going to be 902 people on that little ship. You've heard of relative humidity? That's when you stand so close to your relative you both sweat. That's the way it was for us. We got on that thing. There were 171 civilians on that. Now I couldn't understand why in the world all these civilians. And there were 900 men and 2 women. 2. And I couldn't figure this out. And as we're getting on the ship, we got on and put our stuff away, and we looked up, and here came 4 officers together. They were laughing and they were having a good time together. And we looked and they said, who are they? I said, those are chaplains. They're going to be on our ship. Chaplains on our ship? What kind of chaplains? Well, they're like pastors. They're like ministers, only they wear a uniform. Oh, yeah, really? Well, one was a Catholic priest. Okay, I knew about Catholics. We had a Catholic priest that came through our community once in a while. We had a few Catholic folks there. And one was a Methodist. Well, I knew about Methodists. We had a little Methodist church. And then they said, one's Reformed. And I said, what, deformed? What? No, reformed. I said, well, he looks good to me. I don't see anything needs to be reforming about him. And then they said, the other guy, he's a rabbi. He's a Jewish rabbi. Well, I'd never seen a rabbi. I'd never seen a Jewish person. I had no idea. And so they got on board, and they seemed to get along well with each other, and they started having services all the time on the ship. We pulled out on the 23rd, and we were at sea for 3 days, headed for Newfoundland. Let me tell you what. It was so cold. It was so cold that when it was snow, the snow wouldn't even melt when it hit the water. That's how cold it was. It was miserable. Talking about miserable, anybody here ever been seasick? Huh? Okay. Those of you who haven't, let me describe what it's like. First, you're afraid you're going to die. Then you're afraid you're not going to die. Oh, man, we were sick. And, down below with all those people, it was miserable. Then we'd come up, and when we got to Newfoundland, the 4 chaplains got off, and they said, okay, guys, we got some things planned here. So they had all kinds of recreational things for us, and we were having a good, and they were in charge of stuff, and we had a good time. They were right nice guys. And when we got back on the ship on the 26th, we didn't know for sure where we were going to go, because we were with Special Group 19 was the name of it, and when we left New York, there were 50 ships. We were a mile apart. You looked out there, nothing but these big ships. And so we said, where are we headed? And Danielson, the ship's captain, said, well, I can't tell you until we pull out. Okay. So when we pulled out, we saw all the other ships going one way, and we took another way. There were 3 ships that were guarding us, and there were 2 other ships that were materials on them, and our troop ship. 6 ships. But we were going a different direction. And finally he said, we're going to Greenland. Greenland? Greenland? I didn't even know where that was. He said, the people said, well, it's further north, which means it's going to be cold. Whoever named it Greenland was blind. There is nothing green on Greenland. So, like I say, we were on the ship, and the chaplains were having services, and so the Catholic priest said he was going to have services. Well, I'd never been to a Catholic service, so I said, well, I've got nothing else to do, I'll go. I mean, talk about a captive audience. What are we going to do, walk on the water? We can't get off this ship. So I went, and it was interesting. I didn't understand a lot of it, but he seemed like a right nice guy. And then they had a Protestant service. Well, that's kind of, I guess, what I was. And so I went to that, and Chaplain Fox had that, and polling helped him. And then I was kind of interested. And so I got to talking with Chaplain Fox, and he looked at me and he said, you're a technical corporal. Yes, sir. Can you drive? Yes, sir. I got right here, it says, wheel vehicle driver. He said, by any chance, can you type? Yes, sir, I can type. By any chance, do you play the piano? I said, yes, sir, I can play the piano. He said, well, I'm looking for somebody to be my chaplain's assistant when we get there. Would you be willing to consider doing that? Now, my IQ is a little bit above my boot size. If I'm working for the chaplain, that's going to be a good deal. It's going to be cold up there. I said, yes, sir, I'll be glad to do that. He said, well, here, let me give you a Bible. He gave me a little steel-covered Bible. Carry it right here. Steel cover, right there. And so we got better acquainted, and in fact, then along came Friday night, and Alexander Good, the rabbi, he had a PhD from Harvard. He was an educated man, but he volunteered to be a chaplain. So I'd never been to a Jewish service, and I heard about it, so I went down there, and all the guys were in the mess hall, the only place that we had services there, and they were all playing cards, and Rabbi said, we're going to have a Sabbath service here, Friday night, in about 10 minutes. And the guy said, oh, no, we're playing cards, we know. And Father Washington stood right up there, and he said, now, boys, you'll end your games in exactly 10 minutes so the good rabbi can have a Sabbath service. A Catholic priest standing up for a rabbi. I thought that was pretty nice. In fact, one of the guys said, okay, Father, come over and bless my hand. Then I'll be done. He walked over, he looked at the guy's hand over his shoulder, and he said, he was Irish, I should waste a blessing on a pair of deuces. That ended the game. Well, it was nice to have somebody to talk to, and the chaplains were there for us. And then we got word that one of the ships that was with us, the Coast Guard cutter, had a radar, or sonar, I guess they called it, and it could listen to stuff under the water. I can't hear anything when I'm under the water, but they could. And the word came to us that there was a German submarine following our little convoy. Then somebody told me, oh yeah, that's not unusual. This is called Torpedo Alley. Thanks for that. And then Captain Danielson came on the speaker system and he said, we're being followed by a torpedo, so we're going to have drills. And he set off an alarm like made me jump out of my skin. And everybody ran up to the machine guns. And I said, how in the world are you going to shoot down a submarine with a machine gun? But everybody did it, and all the crew got ready, and it was miserable cold. Then about 6:30 that night, the PA system went off again, and he said, Captain Danielson, he said, everybody, when you go to sleep tonight, put on all your clothing, your overcoats, and your life vest. This stuff is heavy wool. 900 people down below in the ship, dressed like you're supposed to be up top. You couldn't do it. Well, some of us tried, and some of us just took off our life vests and did the best we could. I was kind of asleep. And suddenly I heard this tremendous roar, and the ship bucked. And I knew in a minute we'd been hit by a torpedo. It hit on the side of the ship, right where the galley was, right where the cooking was done, right where the refrigeration was. And when it blew up, it killed many people just in that first blast. And then things were on fire. And it released all the ammonia in the cooling system, and that was flooding through. People were screaming and hollering and scrambling to get out. I ran as fast as my legs could take me. I got up on the deck, and they blew the whistle of the ship as a warning. 7 blasts. We got to 6, and the 7th one went out because all the power went off. And the other ships sailed on. You see, standard procedure was if you're hit by a torpedo by the enemy, you don't stop, because if you're standing still, you're an easier target. Danielson gave the order to abandon ship. Now, we had 1 motor launch. We had 13 life rafts. We had 2 8-by-8-foot platforms on oil drums. And we had 45 what we called donuts. They were round things that had net underneath. Enough for about 1,200 people. But the problem was, in this rough sea, salt water was splashing up, and it had frozen the davits. Those are the pulleys where you lower the life rafts. And people were beating on them with their fists. One man was clawing so much he tore the skin off of his fingers until you could see the bone. Desperation to get to those lifeboats. Finally, one was lowered into the water, and somebody jumped off to jump in it. It was a wooden lifeboat. He went right through the bottom. Then somebody got the idea, if we get enough people in it, maybe the weight will help break the davits loose. And so they loaded one up, overloaded it. And one of the davits broke, the one in front, and it dumped everybody right into the ocean. They threw the donuts overboard, and people began to pile into those. But remember, it's just this floating cork circle and then the net that goes down into the water. So while you're not really out of the water unless you're up on the edge. And people were piling into those until they began to tip over. And people were scrambling and trying to find life vests. And the chaplains were there at the lockers because we had life vests up on the top, and they were taking them out, and they were passing out life vests until they had turned to us and they said, "There are no more." And I heard myself say, "I don't have a life vest. What am I going to do?" I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned. It was Chaplain Fox. He said, "Here, son, take my life vest." I said, "Sir, I can't do that. You'll need it." He said, "Take it." "Sir, I can't." He said, "That's an order. Take it." He took it off and put it on me. While I was doing that, I saw Chaplain Good, the rabbi, take off his life vest and put it on a man that was wounded and help lower him into one of those donuts. Chaplain Good took off his leather gloves and he gave them to Lieutenant Mahoney. Mahoney said, "No, I can't take those." He said, "Take them. I have another pair." He didn't have another pair. One of the cooks came screaming up on the top, screaming, crazy man. He had a cleaver in his hand. He said, "Get out of my way. I want to get in one of those boats." One of the lieutenants shot him dead right on the spot. Desperation. And I'm standing there looking at that sea. I heard Chaplain Fox say, "Jump, son." I didn't want to jump. Then I felt his hand on my back and he said, "Be safe." And he pushed me. When I hit that water, it was like 10,000 needles going into my skin. It was so cold. I couldn't breathe. I was covered with oil. I knew I had to get away from the ship, so I swam as fast as I could toward one of the donuts that was there. It was loaded with people, and when I got to the edge, barely able to breathe, I heard somebody say, "Push him away, push him under. We're too overloaded as it is." And they pushed me down onto the water, and then suddenly I felt a hand grab the back of my life vest, and they heaved me onto the top of the people that were there. I looked on the deck of the boat. There were 4 chaplains, arms linked together, singing and praying as the ship went under. They had willed that 4 others might live. About 45 minutes later, one of the ships came back, the Escanaba. They broke the rules. They came back looking for us. About 2 hours later, the Comanche, another ship, came back. Now you see, we've been taught when you go in the water, you twist this to turn it on. That's a plea for help. As far as I could see, the sea was covered with blinking red lights that had to be turned on by a living man when they hit the water. It wasn't automatic. But after a while, the kapok vests filled with water, and they become an anchor that drags you down. And these lights that were supposed to be a plea for help were a cynic symbol of death, because no one in the water could survive more than 10 minutes. On the Comanche, there were 2 men. Charles David, a black man. He was a mess steward, big man. He tied a rope around himself and he jumped into that ice water again and again and again to pull people to safety. I was one of them that was pulled in. The other man's name was Swanson. Charles David got me onto the Comanche. They got me warmed up. We got to Bluey 1 West, which was our place to be. We were supposed to build a radio tower, extend the runway, guard the cryolite mines. That's why we were there. That's why all the engineers were there. Then it made sense. I asked where Charles David was, and they said he's in the hospital. He'd been in the water so long that he contracted pneumonia. I went to see him in the hospital bed. Several days later, he died. A rabbi, a Catholic priest, a Methodist, a Dutch Reformed, a black man, all worked together to give me life. When I got out of the hospital myself, I had some injuries to my feet, still do. Commander called me in. He said, "We've got to find a job for you." He said, "I know your feet are damaged. Can you type?" "Yes, sir, I can type." "Can you drive?" "Yes, sir, I can drive." He said, "Good, you're my clerk." So now I'm typing orders. I'm looking out at that gray sea, reminding me of all the stuff that I'd gone through, and it was not pleasant. But when you type orders and you type requisitions, I learned you put them all on a clipboard with just the signature blank showing. So you just hand them to the boss and he signs everything and it's ordered. Then I had an idea. He requested orders for transfers. There's a new unit starting up in the Pacific. It's based in Hawaii. Now, if you have a typewriter and you're cutting orders and you hate where you are, what would you do? That's what I did. I typed up orders for myself. I put it in the stack of things. He never looked. He just signed them. And a couple weeks later, he looked at me. He said, "You have orders for Hawaii. I know how you did that." "Who, me?" He said, "Why didn't you put my name down too?" So I left, and I came across country. North Platte, Nebraska. We stopped there. North Platte Canteen. They served 6,000 men on railway trains as they were going across country. You talk about sharing what you have. These were poor farm people. They didn't get any subsidy. They took things out of their own cover, and they fed 6,000 men, and I was one of them as we went through. I got to Hawaii just in time to be reassigned to the 91st Division. We participated in the Philippines, Leyte Gulf. That's where I got some of these ribbons. Oh, I've seen some things that no man should ever see. I've experienced things that no man should ever experience. War is terrible. But I'll tell you this. I saw the face of God in the face of those 4 chaplains. It's the greatest thing I've seen this side of heaven. You know, there are only 2 people who ever were willing to risk their life to give you freedom. One is the person who wears a uniform. They risk their lives so that you and I can have freedom here and now. Don't forget to be thankful for freedom. And there is another who risked his life that we can have freedom forever. His name is Jesus. The chaplain gave me this Bible. My favorite verse? John 15:12 and 13. "This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." I know what that means as a soldier. And I know what that means as a follower of Christ. He died that we can live forever and be free. Be thankful for the freedom that our military gives us, but more than that, for the freedom that comes through Jesus, our Christ. May He bless you. May He be your life preserver.